At my grandson's school auction, my son stood on the little stage beside a basket of donated cookies, smiled at 200 neighbors, and said, "Dad, we've already signed you up for the best nursing home in Missouri," while his wife dropped my late Mary's red recipe box into the charity bin like it was trash. For a second, the whole gym went quiet. Then somebody laughed, because they thought it was one of those family jokes people make when an old man forgets where he parked. But I had not forgotten anything. I watched that small red box hit the bottom of the plastic donation tub. I watched my granddaughter, Ellie, freeze beside the folding table with a paper plate in her hands. She was 9 years old, thin as a willow branch, with Mary's dark eyes and the kind of quiet children get when grown-ups have taught them that crying makes trouble. My son, Preston, kept smiling. His wife, Marla, put one hand on my shoulder like she was comforting me and said loud enough for the whole room to hear, "Frank gets attached to things. We're helping him let go." I looked down at Mary's recipe box, red metal, white daisies painted on the lid, a dent near the corner from the day Mary dropped it during our first move after I came home from the army. For 41 years, that little box sat on our kitchen shelf. It held biscuit cards, church supper recipes, birthday notes, and the promises Mary made me write down because she said men forget the soft things first, and now my family had put it beside used toys, old shoes, and a cracked blender. If you've ever been made to feel small by your own family, stay with me, because what happened next changed everything I believed about love, blood, and justice. I did not shout. I did not grab Preston by his collar. I did not embarrass Ellie any more than she had already been embarrassed. I just stepped forward, picked up Mary's recipe box, brushed a little dust off the lid, and looked at my son. He leaned close and whispered, still smiling for the room, "Don't make a scene, Dad. You'll only prove our point," I said. "Preston, I spent 26 years as a postal inspector. I learned a long time ago that the quietest envelopes usually carry the worst crimes." His smile twitched. Marla laughed too fast. "See, this is what we mean." He starts talking in riddles. Then Ellie said something so softly I almost missed it. "Grandpa, are they sending you away because of me?" That broke something in me. Not loud, not in a way anybody could see. It broke like ice under snow. I looked at that child, and I knew right then, this was not only about me getting old. It was not about a nursing home. It was not even about Mary's recipe box. It was about what my son had been hiding behind clean shirts, church smiles, and the word care. My name is Frank Whitaker. I am 69 years old. I live in a small town outside Springfield, Missouri, in a white house with green shutters, a sagging porch swing, and a kitchen window that catches the sunrise just the way Mary loved it. I served in the Army when I was young, but the work that shaped me came later. I was a postal inspector for more than 2 decades. I investigated stolen checks, forged signatures, false addresses, identity scams, missing pension payments, and the kind of quiet fraud that happens when people think nobody will look twice at paper. Paper tells on people. That was one of the first things my old supervisor taught me. A lie can be loud. Paper stays patient. My son Preston never liked that about me. When he was little, he loved me the way boys love fathers before the world teaches them to compare. He used to wait by the mailbox every afternoon because he thought my job meant I personally delivered every letter in America. He'd run beside my truck when I came home, waving one of Mary's biscuits in a napkin. But somewhere after college, after the business degree and the new friends and the polished shoes, Preston decided I was a small man from a small place. He started correcting how I spoke. He stopped bringing his friends by the house. When he married Marla, he began saying things like, "Dad, you don't understand how modern finance works," or "Dad, you're too trusting," which usually meant he was about to ask me to trust him. Mary saw it before I did. She never hated Preston. A mother's heart can ache and hope at the same time. But in her last year, when the cancer made her bones hurt and her voice thin, she started watching him in a different way. He talks around the truth. She told me one night, we were sitting in the kitchen. Rain tapped the window. The red recipe box was open between us because she had asked for the peach cobbler card, though she was too sick to eat. She ran her finger over the card like she was touching a memory. I said, "He's just trying to make something of himself." Mary looked at me with those tired eyes. "No, Frank, he's trying to make something out of everybody else." I did not want to believe her. That is one thing I need to say plain. Sometimes betrayal does not begin when someone hurts you. It begins when you defend them for years while they practice. After Mary died, Preston came around more often. At first, I thought grief had softened him. He brought groceries, he took me to doctor appointments. He changed the batteries in the smoke detectors. He convinced me to put his name as emergency contact at the clinic, the bank. Then Marla began organizing my life. She labeled my cabinets. She took my checkbook to balance it. She said I should stop driving at night, then stop driving on the highway, then stop driving unless somebody was with me. She had a way of making control sound like kindness. "Frank," she would say, touching my arm, "we just want you safe." Preston would stand behind her with that tired little smile, like I was a problem they had both agreed to solve. The only light in those months was Ellie. She was not Marla's child. Preston had her before he married Marla, with a woman named Tanya who died when Ellie was 5. Nobody talked about Tanya much. Preston said it was too painful, but I noticed he had removed every photograph of her from his house. Ellie spent Wednesday afternoons with me because her school bus stopped 2 streets over. We baked Mary's biscuits, or I baked, and Ellie pushed flour around the counter like she was building snowdrifts. Mary's recipe box stayed open whenever Ellie was there. Grandma wrote crooked, Ellie told me once. She wrote fast, I said. Her hands tried to keep up with her heart. Ellie smiled at that. There was one card in the box she liked best, not because of the recipe. It was for oatmeal cookies, but Mary had written something on the back in blue ink. For rainy days, sad days, and children who need to remember they are wanted. Ellie asked me what that meant. I told her. It means your grandma believed food could hold a person together when words couldn't. She carried that card around sometimes while the cookies cooled. So, when Marla dropped that red box into the charity bin, she was not just insulting an old widower's kitchen junk. She was telling Ellie that the last soft place in our family did not matter. The auction was supposed to raise money for the school library. Preston had sponsored a table through his real estate development company, Whitaker Urban Renewal. He liked that name. It made him sound like a man who saved places instead of squeezing them. He had become well known in town over the last 5 years. He bought old lots, cleaned them up, made speeches about growth, donated to school events, shook hands with pastors and county commissioners. People said, Preston takes care of his father, like he deserved a medal for stopping by my house with store-bought soup. That night, he wore a Navy suit and spoke into the microphone like a man accepting an award. My father has been struggling more than he wants to admit, he said. As a family, we've made the loving choice to move him into a wonderful senior care community where he'll have structure, meals, and supervision. Supervision. That word landed harder than nursing home. People turned to look at me with pity. Some looked away. Old friends from church suddenly found their punch cups interesting. Nobody wants to stare directly at a man while his dignity is being packed up in public. I wanted to say, I am not struggling, but my hands were shaking, and I hated that, because shaking hands make people believe anything said about an old man. Preston continued, Dad's home has become too much for him. We're making sure his assets are handled responsibly. Asset, not memories, not Mary's garden, not the porch where Ellie learned to whistle. Assets. I looked at Ellie again. Her lower lip trembled. Marla bent down and hissed something in her ear. Ellie straightened fast, like a child trained to hide pain on command. That was when I noticed the first strange thing. Marla's purse was open on the table. Inside it, tucked halfway under a packet of auction tickets, was a blue folder with a silver sticker from County Probate Services. My name was printed on the tab, not handwritten. Printed Franklin H. Whitaker, Capacity Review. That phrase chilled me. You do not need a capacity review to sign a man up for a friendly senior apartment. You need it when you are trying to prove he cannot make decisions for himself. I did not understand the whole shape of it yet, but I knew my son had not simply chosen a nursing home. He had started the process to take control of my life. After the auction, Preston drove me home in his SUV. Marla sat in front. Ellie sat beside me in the back, holding Mary's recipe box on her lap, because I had taken it back from the donation tub and refused to let it out of my hands. The ride smelled like leather and Marla's sharp perfume. Nobody spoke for 10 minutes. Then Preston said, Dad, tonight could have gone smoother. I looked out the window at the dark fields. He sighed. You scared people, I said. I didn't say anything. That's what I mean. Standing there with that look, making everyone uncomfortable. Marla turned around. You have to understand, Frank. People already know. You forget appointments. You leave doors unlocked. You get confused about bills. That's not true. She gave me a sad little smile. Honey, denial is part of decline, Ellie whispered. He doesn't forget with me. Marla's eyes snapped to her. Ellie, adults are talking. The child shrank into the seat. Preston pulled into my driveway and parked but kept the engine running. We tour Cedar Haven Monday morning. You'll like it once you stop fighting. I'm not moving Monday. He turned to face me. His voice stayed gentle, but his jaw hardened. You don't really have a choice, Dad. The paperwork is already in motion. There it was, the first true sentence of the night. I opened the door slowly. My knees hurt in the cold, but I made myself stand steady. Preston got out and came around. Dad, don't make me go through the court. Please, let's do this kindly. I looked at my son under the yellow porch light, and for one heartbeat I saw the boy with biscuit crumbs on his shirt. Then I saw the man who had made my granddaughter ask if I was being sent away because of her. I said, you do what you think you can prove. His face changed, not much, just enough. Marla stepped closer. That sounded like a threat. No, I said. That was experience. They drove away with Ellie still in the back seat. She pressed her small hand to the window as they left. I stood in the driveway until the taillights disappeared. Inside, the house felt too quiet. Mary's chair sat by the window. Her gardening gloves still hung on a nail by the back door because I never found the courage to move them. I put the red recipe box on the kitchen table. For a long time, I just sat there with my hand on the lid. Then I opened it. Most of the cards were familiar. Chicken dumplings, lemon pie, cornbread dressing. A grocery list from 1998 that Mary had kept because Preston had drawn a rocket ship on the back when he was 7. But something was wrong. The oatmeal cookie card was missing. The one Ellie loved. I took every card out, one by one. My hands stopped shaking then. That's something people do not understand. Fear makes me shake. Purpose makes me still. The card was gone. In its place, at the very bottom of the box, was a folded piece of wax paper I had never seen before. It was tucked under the metal seam, almost invisible unless you emptied the whole thing. On the wax paper in Mary's handwriting were 4 words. Frank, check the nutmeg. I stared at it. Mary hated nutmeg. She said it made everything taste like a candle. We had joked about that for 40 years. Whenever a recipe called for nutmeg, she crossed it out and wrote, not in my kitchen, so why would she tell me to check it? I went to the spice cabinet. Most of the jars were new because Marla had organized my kitchen. Alphabetical labels, clear plastic risers, nothing Mary would have done. The nutmeg jar sat in the back. I unscrewed it. No smell came out. Inside was not nutmeg. Inside was a tiny brass key wrapped in cotton and a strip of paper with a number written on it. Unit 14, Bell Road Storage. For a moment, I could not breathe. Mary had hidden a storage key inside a spice she knew I would never use. That was the first time I understood my wife had seen this coming before I did. I did not sleep that night. At 5:30 the next morning, I made coffee strong enough to float a horseshoe and called the only person I trusted with official trouble. Her name was Judith Bell. She was 72, sharp as a tack, and had worked as a deputy county clerk for 34 years. Her husband had been my friend. Mary used to bring them apple cake every Christmas. Judith answered on the 3rd ring. Frank, she said, either somebody died or somebody lied. You never call before sunrise. Maybe both, I said. She was quiet for 1 second. Come by after 7. Judith lived in a brick ranch house with wind chimes on the porch and county records in her blood. When I showed her the wax paper, the key, and told her about the blue folder in Marla's purse, she did not interrupt. That is how you know somebody is really listening. When I finished, she poured me more coffee and said, capacity review means they may be seeking guardianship or conservatorship. I figured. Have you signed any powers of attorney lately? I signed a medical release last year. Preston said the clinic needed it so he could help with appointments. Judith's mouth tightened. Anything else? Bank emergency contact. Maybe a household management paper Marla brought after Mary died. I was tired. I didn't read it like I should have. She looked at me the way good friends look when they want to scold you but love you too much. You were grieving, she said. That doesn't make paper less binding. No, she said, but fraud makes paper bleed. I almost smiled. Mary would have liked that line. Judith leaned back. We need to know what they filed. And we need to get you evaluated by your own doctor before their doctor paints you as incompetent. My doctor knows I'm fine. Doctors know what's in front of them. Lawyers know what's on paper. Then she asked about Ellie. I told her what the child said in the SUV. Judith looked toward her window. Frank, If they're trying to control you, there may be a reason they need you out of that house fast. That sentence stayed with me. Fast. Why fast? The Cedar Haven tour was Monday. This was Saturday. That gave me less than 48 hours before Preston pushed me into whatever plan he had already set in motion. Judith drove me to Bell Road Storage because she said I was too angry to drive clean. Unit 14 was at the back, behind a chain-link fence and a row of old boat trailers. The brass key turned with a sticky click. Inside was not much. A cedar chest, 3 cardboard boxes, a folding chair, 1 dusty lamp, and on top of the cedar chest, a sealed envelope with my name written in Mary's hand. Frank, when they call you confused, open this first. My knees weakened. Judith touched my elbow but did not speak. I opened the envelope. Inside was a letter, a small flash drive, and a receipt from a notary dated 6 months before Mary died. The letter began, "My dearest Frank, if you are reading this, then Preston has stopped asking and started taking." I had to sit down on the folding chair. Mary's words blurred, then cleared. She wrote that during her final year, she had noticed withdrawals from a joint household account we had set up to help with medical costs. At first, she thought I had moved money. Then she checked with the bank and learned someone had used her online access from Preston's office computer. She did not confront him right away. Mary never rushed into pain. She watched. Then she found out Preston had taken out a business loan using projected inheritance as collateral, not official inheritance. A private financial statement claiming he expected to control my house and Mary's small life insurance payout. Mary had written, "He is not only after what we leave behind, he is spending it before we are gone." I pressed the paper against my chest. Judith whispered, "Lord have mercy." The letter continued. Mary said she had met with an attorney named Harold Voss, a quiet estate lawyer in Nixa. She did not change her will in some dramatic secret way. She did something better. She created a protection file, a file documenting bank irregularities, suspected forgery, statements from 2 witnesses, and a notarized declaration that she feared Preston and Marla might try to isolate me after her death. She also created something called a springing protective trust for our home, but not the kind Preston could touch. It would activate only under certain conditions: attempted forced placement, proven financial exploitation, or a guardianship petition filed by a family member with a conflict of interest. At the bottom of the letter, Mary wrote, "I am sorry I did not tell you. You would have defended him. I needed to protect you from your mercy." That sentence hurt because it was true. I would have defended Preston. I had defended him. The flash drive had a small label, "Kitchen, March 12." Judith had a laptop in her car. We sat there in the storage unit doorway, cold air moving around us, and opened the file. It was an audio recording. Mary's voice filled the small space, weak but steady. "I know about the withdrawals." Then my son's voice. "Mom, you don't understand how business liquidity works. I understand $38,000 is gone. That money was family money. It was for treatment. You're dying either way." Judith covered her mouth. I closed my eyes. On the recording, a chair scraped. Mary breathed hard. Preston lowered his voice. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean it like that." Mary said, "Yes, you did." Then Marla's voice entered, smooth and cold. "Mary, stress worsens confusion. Maybe we should talk when you're more lucid." Mary laughed once, not happy, just amazed. "I'm sick, Marla. I'm not stupid." The recording ended with Preston saying something I had never heard from my son before. "If Dad finds out, he'll forgive me. He always does." I sat there in that storage unit, holding my dead wife's proof in my lap, and felt shame hotter than anger. He was right. That was the worst part. He knew my love was the weakness he could count on. Judith closed the laptop softly. "Frank, this is bigger than a nursing home." I nodded. By sunset that day, I knew the danger was not what Preston had already done. It was what he needed to finish before I found the rest. Harold Voss's office smelled like paper, lemon polish, and old coffee. He was 80 if he was a day, with white eyebrows and a bow tie that made him look harmless. He was not harmless. Mary had chosen well. He listened to Judith and me, then opened a file cabinet behind his desk and pulled out a thick brown folder. "Mrs. Whitaker instructed me to release this to you, only if one of 3 triggers occurred," he said. "Attempted involuntary placement, financial control petition, or disappearance of the red recipe box." I looked at him. "The recipe box?" He nodded. "She said if they touched that box, they had stopped pretending." My throat tightened. Harold slid the folder toward me. "Your wife was a very careful woman. Inside were copies of bank statements, letters, notarized notes, and photographs of documents. Mary had made a timeline in her own handwriting. She had marked dates when Preston visited, dates when money moved, dates when Marla called doctors, dates when I was out buying prescriptions. She had included one page titled, "If Frank Doubts Himself." Under it, she wrote, "Frank, you are not losing your mind. They will make you think you are. Read the dates. Trust the dates. Trust the little things you noticed." I had to turn away. A man can survive grief by keeping busy. But there is a special kind of pain in learning that the person you lost was protecting you while she was dying. Harold gave me another document. This is the trust instrument. Your home is not directly in your personal estate anymore. Mary transferred her interest and your survivorship agreement into a restricted family protection trust with your consent. My consent? He pointed to a page. You signed during her treatment planning. She told me you both discussed asset protection from medical creditors. I remembered signing something in the hospital cafeteria while Mary slept upstairs. She had said, "This keeps the house safe." I thought she meant from bills. Harold continued, "You are the lifetime resident. You cannot be removed from the property by Preston. If anyone attempts to force removal through fraudulent incapacity claims, the trust appoints an independent trustee. Who?" He folded his hands. "Me, temporarily. Then Judith, if she accepts." Judith looked surprised, then nodded once. Harold's face darkened. "But there is a complication. There always is." He pulled out a county property notice. It showed my parcel number, my address, and an application for redevelopment zoning review. Applicant, Whitaker Urban Renewal, my son's company. I stared at the page. "He filed to include your block in a senior living expansion proposal," Harold said. "Cedar Haven's parent company is negotiating land assembly. Your house is the middle parcel. Without it, their plan becomes expensive. With it, Preston stands to receive a significant finder's fee and development stake." The room went very quiet. Preston was not putting me in Cedar Haven because I needed care. He was putting me there because Cedar Haven needed my land. And he had stood in a school gym in front of my granddaughter and called it love. I asked, "How long?" Harold took off his glasses. "Preliminary county review Tuesday morning. If they can show you consented to move and your property is available, the project advances. If they can also show a capacity petition is uncontested, they may get temporary control over your affairs pending full hearing." "Tuesday," I said. It was Saturday afternoon. Harold nodded. "They're moving fast because they believe you won't know where to look. That was their mistake. I knew exactly where to look. Old habits came back like muscle memory, not anger." Procedure. In my years as a postal inspector, I learned that fraud has a rhythm. First, the setup, then the paper trail, then the pressure, then the rush. Rushing is where liars tear their own seams. Judith and Harold helped me build a list: capacity petition, medical letters, bank authorizations, property filings, Cedar Haven contracts, notary logs, any document with my signature, any mail forwarded without my consent. Mail. That word caught on something in my mind. For 3 months, I had not received my quarterly pension statement. Preston told me everything was digital now. I believed him because most things are digital now, and because grief makes old men tired. But federal pension statements do not just vanish because a son says so. On Monday morning, while Preston expected me to tour Cedar Haven, I went to the post office where I had once trained half the staff. A clerk named Luis recognized me right away. "Mr. Whitaker, haven't seen you in a while. I need to check whether there's an active mail forwarding order on my address." He looked uncomfortable. "You'd need ID. I handed it over," he typed. His face changed just a little. Postal workers are trained not to react. Luis reacted. "What is it?" I asked. He lowered his voice. "There was a temporary forward placed 6 weeks ago." "To where?" He hesitated. "Luis," I said gently, "I spent 26 years enforcing the rules you're worried about. Print the customer copy request. I'll sign whatever release you need." He went to the back. When he returned, he brought the supervisor, a woman named Carla Reese. She had worked fraud prevention. She knew me too. In her office, she showed me the form. My mail had been forwarded to a private mailbox rented under the name F.H. Whitaker Care Management. The signature was mine, except it was not. It looked like mine to a stranger. The F leaned too far right. The W had the wrong middle dip. Whoever forged it had copied my name from a check, not from the way I signed official forms. Carla said, "We'll open an internal inquiry. I need certified copies." She nodded. "You'll have them." Then she looked at me with the kind of pity I hated but understood. "Frank, This was submitted online with identity verification. Using what? Last four of social old address and a scanned driver's license. Only 3 people had access to that. Me, my doctor's office, and Marla when she organized my files. I left the post office with my first fresh piece of proof. Then I drove to Cedar Haven, not for the tour. For the contract, Preston was waiting in the lobby, checking his watch. Marla stood beside him in a cream coat, speaking to a woman with a name tag that said admissions director. She smiled when she saw me. "There he is," Preston said too brightly. "Dad, we were worried." "No, you weren't," I said. His eyes hardened, then softened for the admissions woman. "He's been having suspicious episodes." Marla touched her chest. "We're learning to be patient." The admissions director looked at me like I was already halfway gone. I gave her my polite public smile. "Mom, before I tour, I'd like a copy of every document bearing my name." Preston stepped in. "Dad, we can review that later." "No," I said. "We can review it now." Marla laughed lightly. "Frank used to work with mail fraud. He gets dramatic about paperwork." I looked at the admissions director. "Then you understand why I read before I sign." The woman hesitated. "Mr. Whitaker, your son provided intake forms, but final admission requires your signature or legal authority." "Has legal authority been provided?" Preston said. "It's pending." The admissions director's eyes flicked to him. That told me something. He had made her believe it was further along than it was. I said, "Did my son tell you my house was part of Cedar Haven's expansion proposal?" The lobby went still. Preston's face flushed. "That is completely separate. Then it won't bother you if I ask for copies." Marla's voice dropped. "You're humiliating your son." I turned to her. "No, Marla, I'm letting him tell the truth in public. There's a difference." She stepped close enough that only I could hear. "Be careful, Frank. Confused old men who get aggressive don't get to stay alone." There it was, the threat under the concern. I smiled sadly. "You should married someone who knew less about intimidation." Preston grabbed my arm. Not hard enough to bruise, just hard enough to claim control. I looked down at his hand. He let go. But not before the security camera above the lobby caught it. Sometimes God does not send lightning. Sometimes he sends a ceiling camera with a clean angle. I got copies of the intake checklist. Not all documents, but enough. One page listed my primary symptoms: wandering, medication confusion, financial paranoia, attachment to deceased spouse's belongings, hostility toward family support. Each symptom had been reported by Marla. At the bottom was a physician referral note from a doctor I had never met, Dr. Calvin Roque. I knew my own doctor. His name was Samuel Green. I had seen him for 14 years. Dr. Roque was not mine. That afternoon, Harold Voss made 3 calls. Judith made 4. I made 1 to Dr. Green. He saw me at 5:30 after his last patient. He had gray hair, tired eyes, and no patience for nonsense. "Frank," he said after giving me a cognitive screening, "you're grieving and angry. You are not incompetent. Put it in writing." He did. Then I showed him the Cedar Haven referral note. His face turned red. "I didn't refer you." "I know. This letter implies review of medical history." "Did you release my records to Dr. Roque?" "No." He checked his system. Then he called his office manager. Then he came back with a printed access log. Someone had requested my medical summary using an authorization form uploaded through the patient portal. Authorized representative Preston Whitaker, witness Marla Whitaker. But Dr. Green pointed to the signature date. "That was the day you were in my office for your blood work." I didn't sign anything. He looked at me. "Then somebody used your portal access." Marla had set up that portal. She said it would help me. I could almost hear her voice. "We just want you safe." By Monday evening, we had forged mail forwarding, questionable medical authorization, a false symptoms list, a development filing, Mary's protection file, and an audio recording of Preston admitting he believed I would forgive him. But we still did not have the thing that explained Ellie. And I knew there was something children feel secrets before adults name them. Ellie had not asked, "Are they sending you away because you're old?" She asked, "Because of me." That night, I called her. Preston did not answer. Marla did. "Frank," she said, sweet as poison, "this isn't a good time. I'd like to say goodnight to Ellie. She's upset because of your behavior. Put her on. I don't think that's healthy." "For whom?" Silence. Then Marla whispered, "You are making this harder than it has to be." I said, "That seems to be happening to a lot of people." She hung up. 10 minutes later, my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Grandpa, it's me. I'm using my old tablet. Please don't tell." She said, I can't come Wednesday because you might forget me at the store. My eyes burned. I typed back slowly, I would never forget you. Are you safe? 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. I don't know. Dad said after you move, we might move too. Marla said I should stop talking about Grandma Mary because she wasn't my real grandma. I had to set the phone down. Mary had loved Ellie from the day Preston brought her over in a pink blanket, scared and motherless. Blood had nothing to do with it. Mary said love is not a birth certificate. Love is who shows up with soup when the fever breaks. Another message came. Grandpa, Marla took the cookie card. She said I stole it. The oatmeal cookie card. I sat upright. Why would Marla take a recipe card? I asked. Where is it now? Ellie replied. In her desk. She said it has scribbles that make you confused. Scribbles, Mary's note on the back for rainy days, sad days, and children who need to remember they are wanted. Was there more on that card? Something Mary had hidden in plain sight? I looked at the recipe box again. The missing card had been the one Ellie carried. The one Lara removed before dropping the box into the donation bin. She had not thrown away the box because she hated clutter. She was looking for that card. And before I tell you what was inside that file, let me ask you something. If your own child tried to erase everything your late wife built, would you stay quiet or would you fight? Tuesday morning came with gray skies and hard rain. The county redevelopment review was scheduled for 9. The guardianship emergency petition was set for 11:30 in a small probate hearing room. Preston had stacked the morning like a man closing doors behind him. Harold told me we could challenge the probate petition, but stopping the development review would require showing the property was legally restricted and that Preston had a conflict of interest. We have enough to slow them, Harold said. Maybe not enough to expose everything. I need that recipe card. Judith looked at me. Frank, I'm not breaking into my son's house. I didn't say you were. I'm picking up my granddaughter from school like I do every Tuesday, when Preston forgets chess club ends early. It's not Tuesday chess. She still has art club. Judith narrowed her eyes. Did she tell you that? No, Mary did. Mary had kept every school calendar. After she died, I kept the habit. At 3:15 Monday, while rain tapped the windshield, I drove to Ellie's school. But before I reached the front entrance, a woman came out carrying a folder under her coat. It was Mrs. Landry, the school counselor. She recognized me and hurried over. Mr. Whitaker, I was hoping to reach you. My stomach tightened. Is Ellie okay? She's in class. But I need to ask you something carefully. Are you still listed as an approved pickup? I should be. She shook her head. You were removed last week. By whom? Her father. That was a small knife. Mrs. Landry looked toward the school doors. Ellie has been anxious. She told me she may have to move away and that she's not supposed to talk about you anymore. She also said. The counselor paused. She said if she tells the truth, her dad will lose the house. The house? Not yours, theirs. Then Mrs. Landry opened her folder and showed me a drawing. Children tell the truth sideways. Ellie had drawn 3 houses. Mine with green shutters, Preston's big brick house, and a third building labeled CEDR-HVN because she had misspelled Cedar Haven. Lines connected them like roads. Under my house, she had drawn Mary's recipe box. Under Preston's house, she had drawn a stack of money with a question mark. Under Cedar Haven, she had drawn me behind a window. In the corner, she had written, If Grandpa goes, Daddy wins. I could hardly speak. Did she say who told her that? Mrs. Landry's eyes filled with anger. She said she heard Marla say it on the phone. The counselor gave me copies of her notes, properly signed and dated. She had already contacted Child Protective Services for guidance because Ellie seemed frightened of being moved out of state. Moved out of state, the ticking clock got louder. Where? Colorado, Mrs. Landry said. Ellie said there are plane tickets for Wednesday. One day after the hearing, Preston was not only moving me into Cedar Haven. He was moving Ellie away before she could say what she had heard, before I could protect her, before Mary's love could reach her. As I left the school, Ellie saw me through the glass door. She lifted her hand. A teacher gently pulled her back, not unkindly, but because rules are rules when paperwork changes. I drove away with both hands on the wheel and tears running down my face, not because I felt defeated, because I finally understood what Mary meant. This was bigger than money. This was about erasing people. Mary, Tanya, me, Ellie, anyone who stood between Preston and the clean story he wanted the world to believe. At 9 the next morning, Harold, Judith and I walked into the county administrative room for the redevelopment review. Preston was already there with Marla and two men in suits from Cedar Haven's parent company. He looked rested, confident, expensive. He gave me a sad smile for the room. "Dad, this isn't the place," I said. "Paper chose the place." The county commissioner, a woman named Renee Foster, called the meeting to order. Preston presented glossy maps and spoke about jobs, senior care, community growth, improved drainage, tax benefits. He did not mention that his father's home sat at the center of the plan. He called it Parcel 7. I almost laughed. Mary had planted tulips on Parcel 7. Ellie had lost her first tooth eating corn on the porch of Parcel 7. I had kissed my wife goodbye for the last time in the bedroom of Parcel 7. Preston called it Parcel 7 because numbers do not cry in public. When Commissioner Foster asked about property owner consent, Preston said, "We anticipate full cooperation once my father's care transition is complete." Harold stood. "There is no consent. Furthermore, the property is subject to a restricted family protection trust, activated by attempted involuntary placement or financial exploitation." Preston's lawyer frowned. "We have not been served with any such instrument." Harold smiled politely. "That is because your client did not ask before filing development plans on land he does not control." Marla whispered to Preston. His face tightened. Harold submitted the trust documents and Mary's notarized declaration. Commissioner Foster read silently. The room felt smaller with every page she turned. Then Preston stood. "With respect, my mother was heavily medicated near the end. These documents may not reflect sound judgment." That was his second mistake. "You do not insult a dead woman's mind when her lawyer is holding her notary log." Harold produced the notary record, medical competency statement from Mary's oncologist, and a video clip recorded at Voss's office. Mary sat in a blue cardigan, thin but clear-eyed, stating her name, date, purpose, and concern that her son may try to pressure her husband after her death. Her voice came from Harold's laptop. "If Preston is honest, these papers will never matter. If he is not, Frank will need them more than he needs my memory." The room was silent. I looked at my son. He would not look at me. Commissioner Foster suspended review of Parcel 7 pending legal determination. That was the first door closing on Preston. But the real fight came at 11:30. Probate court was in a plain beige room that smelled like copier toner. No jury, no grand speeches, just a judge, a clerk, two tables, and lives being changed in low voices. Preston's petition claimed I was unable to manage my affairs, at risk of self-neglect, paranoid, emotionally unstable, and vulnerable to financial mistakes. He requested temporary conservatorship over my finances and authority to place me in residential care. Marla sat beside him wearing pearls. I sat between Harold and Judith, with Mary's recipe box on the table in front of me. The judge, Honorable Elaine Mercer, read through the file. She looked over her glasses at me. "Mr. Whitaker, do you understand why you're here?" "Yes, Mom. My son wants control of my money, my house, and my mailbox before lunch." A corner of her mouth moved, but she stayed professional. "Please answer only what is asked." "Yes, Mom." Preston's lawyer began with concern. He painted a picture of an aging widower lost in grief, clinging to objects, suspicious of help, unable to understand modern affairs. He submitted Marla's symptom list. He submitted Dr. Roque's referral. He submitted photographs of my kitchen before Marla organized it, showing dishes in the sink and newspapers on the table. Dishes and newspapers, evidence of being alive. Then Preston spoke. His voice shook just enough. "I love my father. This is the hardest thing I've ever done. But he's changed since Mom died. He thinks we're stealing from him. He wanders around old storage units. He frightens my daughter with stories about conspiracies." The judge looked at me. "Mr. Whitaker, did you frighten your granddaughter?" "No, Mom. Other people did that." Preston closed his eyes like I had wounded him. Marla wiped a tear that did not fall. Then Harold stood. He did not start with Mary's recording. He started with me, my doctor's cognitive evaluation, my bank records showing bills paid on time, my driving record, my volunteer logs from the Veterans Center, statements from neighbors who saw me shovel snow, repair porch rails, and drive Ellie to library day without incident. Then he submitted the mail forwarding form. Judge Mercer leaned forward. "Mr. Whitaker, did you authorize your mail to be forwarded?" "No, Mom." Harold showed the signature comparison, then the medical portal authorization, then Cedar Haven intake forms, then the development filing, then the false symptom report. One by one, paper told on people. Preston's lawyer objected. Harold answered. The judge allowed more than Preston expected. Marla's face changed first. Her soft concern drained into calculation. Then Harold called Carla Reese from the post office, who testified that the forwarding request was under investigation and that the signature appeared inconsistent with known exemplars. Dr. Green testified by phone that I was competent and that he had not referred me to Cedar Haven. Mrs. Landry, the school counselor, testified that Ellie had expressed fear about me being sent away and about being moved out of state. Preston whispered fiercely to his lawyer. The judge noticed. "Mr. Whitaker," she said to my son, "is there a planned relocation involving the minor child?" Preston stiffened. "A short family trip." Harold stood. "Your Honor, we have reason to believe one-way tickets were purchased for tomorrow." The judge's eyes sharpened. "Do you have proof?" Harold glanced at me. This was the part we did not have, not yet. Then the courtroom door opened. A woman stepped in wearing a raincoat, holding a manila envelope against her chest. For a moment, I did not recognize her. Then I did, Tanya's sister. Lydia Cross. I had not seen her since Ellie's mother's funeral. Preston turned white. Lydia walked to Harold, whispered something, and handed him the envelope. The judge was not pleased. "Counsel?" Harold said. "Your Honor, this witness has information directly related to the child's safety and the petitioner's credibility." Preston stood. "This has nothing to do with my father." Lydia looked at him and said, "It has everything to do with why you need him gone." Her voice was shaking, but she did not back down. Judge Mercer allowed a brief offer of proof. Lydia took the stand. She said Tanya, Ellie's mother, had left behind a small education trust funded by a malpractice settlement after a delayed diagnosis contributed to her death. Preston had told everyone the trust was tiny and restricted, but Tanya had named Mary as a backup family monitor because she trusted Mary to make sure Ellie's money was used only for Ellie. I turned slowly toward Preston. Mary had never told me that, or maybe she had planned to before cancer took her strength. Lydia continued. After Mary died, Lydia tried to get annual trust statements, but was told Preston had sole parental access. Recently, she received an automated notice from the trust company because an old email of Tanya's forwarded to her account. It showed a requested change of mailing address and a pending petition to liquidate part of Ellie's education fund for relocation and special care needs. Special care needs. Ellie did not have special care needs. She had adults making her afraid. Lydia said she contacted Preston, and he told her I was unstable, Mary had been confused, and Ellie needed distance from old grief patterns. Then Lydia took a folded paper from the envelope, a flight itinerary, Preston, Marla, and Ellie. Springfield to Denver, Wednesday morning. One way the judge's face went cold. "Mr. Whitaker," she said to Preston, "were you planning to remove the child from the state while seeking emergency authority over your father's affairs, and while your development proposal involving his residence was pending?" Preston's lawyer put a hand on his arm. Preston did not answer. Marla did. "Your Honor, this family has been under tremendous stress because Frank refuses to accept help. We were trying to create a healthier environment." The judge looked at her. "For whom?" Marla's mouth closed. Then Harold reached into Mary's recipe box. I looked at him, surprised. He had not told me. From inside a side seam I had never noticed, he removed a small plastic sleeve, the oatmeal cookie card. My breath stopped. "How?" I whispered. Harold said softly, "Mary made 2. He handed it to me. On the front was the recipe Ellie loved. On the back was Mary's familiar sentence, "For rainy days, sad days, and children who need to remember they are wanted." But beneath that, in tiny writing I had never seen, was a line of numbers and letters: HV, Ellie file, drawer 3, witness LC Harold Voss, Ellie file, drawer 3. Witness Lydia Cross. The recipe card was not just a memory, it was an index card. Mary had hidden directions to Ellie's protection file inside the one object Ellie would never willingly throw away. Harold opened a second folder. Inside was Mary's notarized statement regarding Ellie. She wrote that Preston and Marla had asked her to sign support letters, allowing Preston to access Ellie's education trust for housing expenses. Mary refused. She wrote that Marla had referred to Ellie as financial leverage during an argument. Mary documented dates, quotes, and a meeting with Tanya's sister Lydia. Then came the final page, a letter from Mary to Ellie, sealed but copied for court. Judge Mercer read silently first. Then she asked Harold to read part of it aloud. Harold's voice softened. "Ellie, if grown-ups ever make you feel like love is something you must earn by staying quiet, they are wrong. You were loved before you could speak. Your mother loved you. I loved you. Grandpa loves you. No money, no house, no angry voice can change that. I covered my face, not because I was ashamed of crying, because grief sometimes deserves privacy even in court. Preston stared at the table. Marla looked furious, not sad. That told the judge more than any document. Then Harold played Mary's kitchen recording. When Preston's voice said, "If Dad finds out, he'll forgive me. He always does." The room seemed to inhale. Judge Mercer stopped the recording before the cruelest part could play again. Maybe she had heard enough. Maybe she was being kind to me. She denied the emergency guardianship petition. Then she ordered an investigation into potential financial exploitation, forgery, and misuse of medical information. She referred the mail forwarding evidence to postal inspectors. She froze any attempted transaction involving my property trust. She issued a temporary order preventing Preston from removing Ellie from the state until family court reviewed the education trust concerns and child welfare reports. Preston stood up too fast. "You can't do that. She's my daughter." Judge Mercer looked at him for a long moment, then started acting like her father instead of her flight risk. Marla gasped. Preston lost control then, not with shouting at first, with pleading. "Dad," he said, turning to me. "Tell them this is a misunderstanding, please. We can fix this as a family." There it was again, family. Some people use that word like a blanket. Others use it like a rope. I looked at my son. I wanted to see the boy. I wanted to find one crumb-covered piece of him still standing there. But all I saw was a man who had tried to trade my freedom for a development fee and his daughter's trust for a fresh start. I said, "Preston, I have been fixing your mistakes with silence for too many years. I'm done making your lies comfortable." He sat down like his legs had failed. Justice did not arrive with thunder. It arrived with a clerk stamping orders and a judge moving to the next case. But to me, that stamp sounded like a locked door opening. The weeks after that were not easy. People like clean endings because they do not have to live through the paperwork afterward. Preston's company lost the Cedar Haven partnership. The county halted the expansion plan. Cedar Haven's parent company denied knowing the full circumstances, which may have been true or may have been convenient. Dr. Roque came under review for signing off on a referral without proper examination. Marla's involvement in the portal access and mail forwarding became part of an investigation. The postal inspectors who came to my house were younger than the men I had trained, but they carried themselves the same way. Polite, patient, careful with copy. One of them noticed my old service plaque in the hallway and said, "Sir, I heard stories about you." I said, "Believe half." He smiled. "Which half?" "The half with evidence." Preston called me 7 times the first week. I did not answer. Then he sent one text. "Dad, Marla pushed too hard." I was trying to keep everything from falling apart. That was the closest he came to admitting anything. I typed several replies and erased them all. Finally, I wrote, "Things fall apart when you build them on stolen ground." I did not send another message. Ellie stayed with Lydia for a short while during the family court review. Then, because Lydia lived 2 hours away, and Ellie begged not to leave her school, the court arranged temporary placement with me, under supervision and support from Lydia and a guardian ad litem. The first night Ellie came back to my house, she stood in the doorway, holding a small backpack, and wearing a coat too thin for the weather. "Do I have to be quiet here?" she asked. I had prepared myself for many questions, not that one. I knelt slowly because my knees are old and honest. "No," I said. "This house already knows every kind of feeling. You don't have to hide yours." She nodded, but she did not cry. Children who have learned to hold tears do not drop them just because someone opens a door. We made oatmeal cookies that night. The recipe card lay on the counter in its plastic sleeve. Not because we needed the recipe. I knew it by heart. But because Ellie wanted it there. She stirred too hard and spilled oats on the floor. Then she froze. I said, "That floor has survived worse." "What?" "Your father once dropped a whole jar of grape jelly right there." She looked down. "Did Grandma get mad?" "Not after he cried." "What did she do?" "Sat on the floor and ate the jelly with a spoon until he laughed." Ellie stared at me. Then she laughed once, small, rusty reel. That sound put more warmth in the kitchen than the oven did. A month later, Harold called me into his office for the final piece Mary had left. "I waited," he said, "because I believed this should be given after the emergency passed." He handed me a small padded envelope. Inside was a cassette tape. I had not seen one in years. Harold had an old player because of course he did. Men like Harold never throw away machines that still serve truth. Mary's voice came through soft static. Frank, if you're hearing this, I'm gone, and you're probably mad at me for hiding things. I laughed through tears. You know me, Mary. On the tape, she breathed slowly. I need you to listen. Preston is still our son. That will make this hard. But love without boundaries becomes permission. Do not give him permission to destroy what is left. Then her voice changed. It became gentler. And Ellie, if she is still little when this happens, keep the red box where she can reach it. Teach her biscuits. Teach her that quiet is not the same as peace. Tell her I did not leave her. My body did. My love did not. The tape clicked faintly. One more thing. In the bottom of the cedar chest is a yellow envelope. That is not for court. That is for healing. Harold looked at me. I haven't opened it. We drove to the storage unit together. In the cedar chest, under an old quilt, was the yellow envelope. Inside were photographs. Tanya holding newborn Ellie. Mary beside Tanya at a picnic, both women laughing. Preston as a young father, asleep in a chair with baby Ellie on his chest. And one put never seen Mary, months before she died, sitting at our kitchen table with Ellie on her lap. The red recipe box sat open. Mary's hand rested over Ellie's small fingers. On the back, Mary had written, "Proof is for court. This is for remembering what we are saving." That broke me worse than the legal papers, because after betrayal, it is easy to let the villain become the whole story. Mary refused that. Even while preparing for the worst, she preserved the good, not to excuse Preston, not to soften the truth, but to remind me that the fight was never about punishment. It was about saving what love had built before greed tried to rename it. Spring came slowly that year. The tulips Mary planted along the front walk pushed through the soil like little flames. Ellie checked them every morning before school. She named them after feelings. The red ones were brave. The yellow ones were maybe. The purple ones were grandma. One Saturday, we painted the porch swing. Ellie got more paint on her sleeves than on the wood. I did not correct her. Some messes are proof a child feels safe. She asked about Preston sometimes. I answered carefully. Does Dad love me? She asked one evening. We were shelling peas at the table. The red recipe box sat between us because it had become less of a container and more of a witness. I wanted to say yes quickly. Adults do that because we want children spared complicated pain, but lies told for comfort can become cages later. So I said, I believe your dad has love in him, but love that hurts people and refuses to tell the truth is not safe to stand under. She thought about that. Can he get better? He can choose better. Will he? I don't know. She nodded. I miss the old him. So do I. That was the first time I admitted it out loud. The court eventually appointed an independent trustee for Ellie's education fund. Preston was ordered to repay misused money pending findings. The investigation into forged documents led to charges I will not dress up here. Fraud, identity misuse, attempted financial exploitation of an elder. Marla took a plea on lesser counts and moved away before the first frost. Preston fought longer. Men like him often do, because image dies harder than truth. He lost his real estate license before he lost the case. That hurt him more than my silence. At sentencing, I attended because I needed to see the end of the road. Ellie did not. She stayed with Lydia and baked muffins. Preston stood in a gray suit that no longer fit his life. He apologized to the court, to the community, to his investors, to his daughter, finally, though she was not there to be used as an audience. Then he looked at me. I'm sorry, Dad, he said. I thought I could fix it before anyone got hurt. I believed that was partly true, not because he was innocent, because most people who do terrible things tell themselves they are only borrowing from tomorrow. Borrowing money, borrowing trust, borrowing silence, borrowing one more lie. Then tomorrow arrives with a judge. When it was my turn to speak, I kept my paper folded in my pocket. I said, Your Honor, I am not here to ask for cruelty. I am here to ask that my son finally meet a consequence I cannot protect him from. Preston cried then. I did too. That may confuse some people. But a father can want justice and still mourn the child his son used to be. The judge ordered restitution, probation under strict terms, community service, and a suspended sentence tied to compliance, because first offenses and cooperation mattered. Some folks wanted prison. Maybe they were right. I'm not a judge, but I know this. Preston lost the power to control my affairs, lost access to Ellie's money, lost his company, lost his public mask, and for the first time in his adult life, had to stand in a room where his father's forgiveness was not available as a hiding place. That was enough for me. Not because it erased the hurt, because it stopped the harm. Months passed. The house grew quiet in a different way. Not the dead quiet after Mary's funeral, a living quiet. The kind with school papers on the table, cookie crumbs near the sink, and Ellie humming while she read on the porch. One rainy afternoon, almost a year after the auction, Ellie came home carrying a small cardboard box. My heart jumped before my mind caught up. She set it on the kitchen table. "What's that?" I asked. "School donation drive," she said. I must have gone pale, because she touched my hand. "It's okay, Grandpa." Inside were canned goods, crayons, and a new notebook. On top was a note in Ellie's handwriting, "For kids who need to remember somebody cares." I looked at her. She shrugged like it was nothing, but her cheeks turned pink. I thought Grandma Mary would like it. I could not speak for a minute. Then I opened the red recipe box and took out a blank card. Mary had kept plenty. She always believed tomorrow might need a recipe. I wrote carefully, "Ellie's rainy day cookies." Then I handed her the pen. She added, "Best when shared with people who don't make you scared." We put the card in the box together. That evening, the rain stopped. Sunlight came through the kitchen window and touched the red metal lid until the white daisies seemed to glow. Ellie carried 2 warm cookies to the porch. One for her, one for me. She looked across the yard at Mary's tulips, now bending in the wet grass. "Grandpa?" "Yes, sweetheart. When I'm grown up, can I have the recipe box?" I looked at that little red box, dented and scratched, the object my son's wife had thrown away because she thought it was only old memories. Inside it were recipes, warnings, maps, love letters, witness trails, and proof that a dying woman had outplanned the living. But more than that, it held the truth that families are not saved by silence. They are saved by courage, by records, by people who refuse to let the vulnerable be erased. I said yes, but not because it's yours to own. Ellie frowned. "Why then?" "Because it's yours to protect." She nodded very seriously, like Mary had handed her a duty. Maybe she had. If this story touched your heart, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I read those places like little porch lights in the dark. I still live in the White House with green shutters. Cedar Haven built its expansion somewhere else. The porch swing creaks. The tulips come back every spring. Judith comes by on Thursdays with gossip and lemon cookies she pretends are better than Mary's. Harold still wears bow ties and keeps copies of everything. Sometimes Preston writes letters. Real letters now. No forged signatures, no legal tricks, just paper with his own hand on it. I read them. I do not always answer. Forgiveness is not a door you owe someone just because they knock. Sometimes forgiveness is a fence. It lets you stop hating without letting danger back into the yard. Ellie is 11 now. She laughs louder. She still startles when adults argue, but not as often. She keeps the oatmeal cookie card in a plastic sleeve and tells people her Grandma Mary was a detective with recipes. I like that. Mary would too. Every so often, I think back to that school auction. The microphone, the laughter, Marla's hand on my shoulder, Preston saying they had signed me up for the best nursing home, like my life was a package they could redirect. I remember standing there with my heart breaking and my hands shaking. And I remember what I said later, when my son told me not to make a scene. Paper chose the place. That is the lesson I leave you with. When people try to make you feel old, confused, weak, or disposable, do not let their volume become your truth. Keep your records. Trust the small things you notice. Listen to the child who gets quiet. Honor the dead who loved you well. And never believe that love requires you to hand your dignity to someone who calls control care. They thought Mary's recipe box was junk. They thought I was too old to fight. They thought Ellie was too young to remember. But the truth was sitting in plain sight the whole time, under a red metal lid with white daisies, waiting for the day somebody cruel enough would finally throw it away.